Hi, I am Jo Owens, the pastor for Digital Ministry at Washington National Cathedral. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking to the author of our Lent book, A Different Kind of Fast, Feeding Our True Hungers in Lent. And her name is Christine Valters Paintner. Christine joins us from Galway, Ireland, which is why she wasn't able to attend a weeknight study with us because of the time difference. But she spends her time leading a group called Abbey of the Arts, and you can learn more at her website, Abbey of the Arts. Without further ado, I invite you to my conversation with Christine. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We had our first session on Tuesday night, and it was amazing. It was really, really wonderful. The only sad part is, as I'm sure you know, it's really hard to get the book.
Yes, well, it is now back in stock, and Amazon, you can finally order it from them, and it shows delivery date like the start of next week. So I know that's not great for Lent, but it's better than nothing. But yes, and then the Kindle version, of course, is always available. But yes, we've been quite frustrated with the whole process, and very glad that it is, obviously feeding a lot of people. So
Yes, yes. Was it just an overwhelming success that everyone was so excited for this book?
yeah, they just sold out of their first print run and then had to scramble to do a second printing. And of course, that takes, a couple of weeks. And yes. So yeah, it's a good problem to have, but it is frustrating when you want people to be able to use it for lunch. So
I apologize, I've been doing lots of notes for folks just so that they can keep following along because not everyone is
yeah,
adept with an ebook,
yeah,
unfortunately. Um, well, I would love to share some of the questions that folks have for you. Um,
yeah.
so one person says, I love the format of this book for Lent. Do you have one or have plans for one for Advent? And I'm sorry that I don't know your full range. I've seen the titles, but I haven't investigated all of the books.
That is a delightful question. And I have actually been thinking because this was so well received, and I do love Advent. We always lead an online retreat at our online abbey for Advent. But yes, I am thinking that a book for Advent would be yeah, perhaps welcome by people. So that's a yes, but it might be a couple of years before it's actually, available because
Take
it's
the
just
whole
the seed of a thought right now.
Right, because you have to first have the seed of the thought and then write it, and then it's a year later that it actually
Yes,
comes
exactly,
out.
exactly.
Well, wonderful. We will be on your list once it comes out because it's
Lovely.
definitely very well received. Thank you. So, what motivated you to do a deeper dive into fasting?
That's a great question because this actually was sparked from a series of articles that I wrote several years ago that were very well received at the time. And at the time, I thought, oh, at some point, I would like to break this open more and go a little more deeply into it. And then I think, to be honest, I think part of it for me is like being in midlife and being in menopause invites a lot of that letting go and a lot of clarity around what's really essential and being in the place in my life where I'm, more aware of my mortality than I maybe was before.
Mhm.
All of those things, and partnered with that I think physical fasting can be a powerful practice, but there's such a unfortunate legacy of disordered eating in the United States and the Western world. And I thought fasting is such a powerful image for how we can get down to that essence
Mhm.
that I thought, well, there's lots of other ways we can fast. So
It's yes, for sure. Although I will say, I can't remember if it was Ash Wednesday week or it must have been Ash Wednesday week because I was still at home. Um, there is that invitation to fast from something physical in your life, and I was like, oh, I feel very convicted here. I know exactly what I need to give up.
Yeah, I get you. I'm with you on that.
It was staring me right in the face. And what's
Mhm.
interesting is that it sparked a great conversation with my husband and my 14-year-old child. And we just had this wonderful talk about what does it mean to fast from something, and what do we feel called to fast from, and why might we feel called? Not this diet culture, not New Year's part two, but taking something out that really is either detracting some more from our lives, or really just not adding. And so
Yeah.
we all knew
I
it
love it. I love it. What a great conversation to have as a family. Yeah, it's
it
beautiful.
was. So if you could have readers take any practices away, or what would you want people to come away from this experience with?
Um, I think ultimately a deepened connection to that sacred presence that's always around us and within us, and and to become more aware of all the ways that we distract ourselves from that, and
Mm.
so how that love is freely available to us moment by moment. And so this, Lent is about, yeah, clearing away all the stuff that gets in the way of that. So ultimately, I'd love people to arrive to Easter with, you know, ready for the resurrection, maybe even in a new way. Yeah, where some of those things have been cleared away that have been distracting for a long time. Ready to practice resurrection and Easter.
Right. Even as, we're taking away the elaborate flower arrangements and
Mhm.
adornments, and having a stark landscape, so that when we do come back, it is that much more joyful.
Yeah, and I would say too, like, that I appreciate you mentioning that, because the fasting is in like tension, in holy tension with the feasting. So it's not that we're meant to always be fasting,
Mhm.
right? We're actually meant to fast so that we can come to the fullness of the feast with renewed vision and renewed heart and all of that, and be able to celebrate that even more deeply and joyfully.
And I appreciate you saying that, because in comparison to the desert elders, you read, oh, we brought him a basket of bread, and the next year we ate a piece of it. I'm like, oh, it's so much. So
Yes,
it's
some of the
nice.
stories can be harsh or extreme. Yeah.
It's nice to remember that this is a season. We are in the season of Lent. We are taking away, so that when it comes to Easter and the season of resurrection, we can feast. But then also to have these practices ingrained in us, so that when the buildup gets to be too much, we can return to the fast at any time. And
Yes.
that's one thing that I try to encourage myself and people that I'm talking with, that the fast can happen anytime, to regain the appreciation for the feast.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that.
Um, so what of the practices that you included, what is speaking to you right now? Or is it a
Mm.
different practice?
I love that. That's a really good question, because those are sort of some of my favorite. Just I'm obviously a contemplative by practice and by profession, uh, and I would say like, kind of the image that's coming to me is, um, I do try and spend a lot of time in silence. And so perhaps in addition to those practices, some, extended time in centering prayer. But then another thing that I try and do, particularly during Lent and some of the special seasons, is to read a poem every morning, and to let it be the seed of writing a new poem myself. So sort of bringing in that more creative spark as well. So in that kind of cleared away space, like planting that seed and then seeing what flowers forth. So
Do you
yeah.
have poets that you turn to especially, or a place that you turn to for your poetry?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some poets that I love. I mean, obviously, I love Mary Oliver and David White, but there's a lot of poets here in Ireland. Grace Wells is a really beautiful poet. Kenneth Stephen is a Scottish poet who's a good friend of our community, and he has some really beautiful writing about Iona and
Mm.
Celtic spirituality and beyond. So I have a very large collection of poetry, single collections of poets. And so sometimes I'll just go and I'll pick one off that I haven't read yet and just start to move through and see how their vision helps to shape mine and renew mine in new ways. So I have a love of poetry. And I also think Lectio Divina, works really beautifully with poetry as well. Of course, the scriptures, a lot of it is also very poetic. So it's a
Mhm.
similar kind of experience.
Mhm. We did Visio Divina together as a group last week because I had anticipated most folks hadn't done it. And I did a little Zoom poll, and indeed, most people had not done it. And I had planned on us going into breakout rooms and talking about it, but our Zoom controls were funny, so we couldn't do breakout rooms. So I had people put in the chat what they took away from that. And it was just astounding.
Mm.
Just my heart filled with so much joy reading everything that our people put into the chat of what they had taken away from this experience. You do such a beautiful job walking us through that. And so I was pairing the fuller explanation with the daily explanation, kind of flipping back
Hmm.
and forth, and just it tied together so well. I never dreamed how much we would all see from that image and how many different things there were to see. So
Yeah.
thank you for introducing us to that practice.
Yeah, you're welcome. I love Visio Divina as a way of seeing things in new ways and entering into prayer in that way. And Craig's art is so beautiful and so perfect for Lent, I think, that
It
sense
is.
of spareness, but
And
power.
I
Yeah.
confess, I had been following him on Instagram for a while, and it was really a day or two ago as I was scrolling, and I'm like, wait, I know that image. We just did Visio Divina. It's in color now. So it was wonderful to put the is it Happy Psalm, something like that. I forget what his title is, but
Oh,
his
Psalm prayers, I think.
that's
Yeah.
what it is, Psalm Prayers, the Psalm Prayers Instagram account with the art from your book. So what was most challenging about writing this book?
Mm. That's a good question too. I think um, and I always want the material to stay kind of fresh and alive as you move through the whole journey. So, if you're repeating practices again and again, hopefully I can,
Mhm.
uh, through my own words, can help spark, when you get to week 5 and maybe you're like, I don't really want to do Visio Divine again, or that might not be the best example because with the image, it's a little bit different, but reading the words, yeah, I'd say probably just trying to keep things fresh and alive as I move through the whole process. And trying to convey that in a book, I
Mm.
hadn't written a Lenten devotional before, so that was, yeah, lovely experience. But
Wonderful. So where did you find the most flow in writing?
Um, that's a good question too. My writing process, I don't have a particular discipline. Like I'm someone who really likes to have big stretches of time when I'm writing, and so I can enter into it and then come back out as much as I need to. So for me, the flow, I follow the flow of the writing, and then when I start to feel kind of stuck or blocked or whatever that experience is, then I try and go for a walk or maybe do a little movement or something that helps to get me into a different frame of mind. Contemplative walking is another practice that I love. And or take I take a lot of baths and I call it bath brain when I am laying there in the bath and all of a sudden, of course, like I have this, wonderful idea and I don't bring my phone into the bathroom intentionally. So that I'm trying to hold on to it. But yeah, I would say that much of the writing for me, I do feel like I'm in a flow process and I try and be really mindful and intentional when that flow feels like it stopped for whatever reason, that maybe I need a little bit of rest or a different perspective or yeah, anything like that.
Diminishing returns.
Yeah.
I'm in a writing group, and so we talk about all of these things. Yes.
hmm
So, as you were coming up with the different topics to fast from, I was I was giving an overview to the group on Tuesday, and of course, as I'm going through, I'm like, oh, this one really speaks to me. Are there any that, and you may need a refresher, I understand, because you may not have looked at it lately, but are there any of the fasting overarching topics, weekly themes that are really important to you or find that you need?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I resonate with all of them, which is why I included them. And there's certainly other things I could have added, but they were the ones that were the most sort of alive for me. But I do find for myself planning, um, like I'm very good at planning and it serves me very well. I'm sure
Mhm.
for you too, working in a church community. Um, and like holding that intention with also really trying to be intentional about opening my hands and not trying to grasp and make things happen. And, we're like planning now for our fall sort of schedule. And I'm very aware of needing to kind of go back and forth in this rhythm of being kind of concrete about what's going to happen, but then also like leaving space open to yeah, to be open to how the inspiration's coming through, that maybe trying not to be as directive and letting,
Mm.
spirit guide the process. But as a planner, it's not even that it's hard, it's that I don't even notice that I'm doing it sometimes, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, maybe I just need to step back here for a minute. So
Yes, I understand. You could pick one theme, and I'm realizing like, oh, well, I'm in American context, you're in Ireland. Our world is our world. But if you could pick one theme that you wish our whole world could fast from, what would it be?
Mm. Oh, that's a beautiful question. The last week is on fasting from certainty and embracing mystery. And I put it there in part because of Holy Saturday,
Mhm.
because for me, Holy Saturday is sort of like the symbol of our lives, where we live in this place between death and resurrection, and we don't know what's going to happen, and there's mystery. And I find in a world where there's so many people who want to reach for certainties and in those certainties are often excluding large groups of people.
Mm.
Uh, and then, when we see, the horrors of war, people on each side are so certain. And I think a little more humility
Mhm.
in the world, and a more of an embrace of mystery and the sense that we can't, yeah, we don't know what God wants. We can listen, but we can listen deeply and again, to speak too quickly to that certainty, I think is very destructive. So being willing to rest in that place of being uncomfortable, which of course none of us want to do, but it's a releasing of control, right? And
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I would add to that, and maybe this is just my personality shining through, is the fast from, it's this coming week, fast from scarcity anxiety.
yeah,
We act out of this place of scarcity, we get into trouble. But when we act out of a place knowing God's abundance and goodwill for the world, then I think things turn out very differently. But those two themes really go hand in hand.
Yeah, yeah, I think that you have touched on that really beautifully. Yes.
Okay, so after everyone has an amazing experience with this book during Lent, what should they do next?
Well, in the last chapter, I do talk a little bit about this idea of practicing resurrection and how they might move forward. And for me, um, a book I might write at some point is a book of practices, daily practices for the season of Easter, because we don't often, Lent is such a key focus in our liturgical life, as it rightly is. And then we get to Easter, and of course, Easter is like the pinnacle. And of course, liturgically, we're still celebrating it. But I think a lot of us in our own prayer practices sort of forget, that it's actually this whole 50-day season. And for me, the season of Easter has a lot to do with embodiment.
Mm.
Practicing resurrection to me, I mean, first of all, Jesus comes back and still has the wounds that he had, in his earthly being, which I think is such a remarkable statement about our embodiment and how we're resurrected and all of that. That's a much bigger conversation. But even just some of the miracles that he performs, like dragging the net of fish and it's overflowing with abundance, and the road to Emmaus and the breaking of the bread and those
Mhm.
kinds of very physical, tangible, this incarnational spirituality. And so for Easter, I would definitely recommend any way that you could move more deeply in touch with your body. I have a whole book called The Wisdom of the Body, just as a little side
I was going to
suggestion,
ask.
which is definitely a way to help support you in that. It's not specifically for Easter, but it definitely is from an incarnational perspective. So yeah, I would say anything that can help you to imagine what practicing resurrection means for you in your life, and then to see what are the practices that would help you to cultivate that. I've been feeling a lot like, we're living in a time of such upheaval and grief and destruction, and we need to have this space for lament, certainly.
Mhm.
And I also feel like there's also, I think, an invitation to some joy and some wonder and some grace and some humor, all the things that remind us of why we're fighting for justice in the first place, and all the, things that keep us showing up day by day. And I think certainly that can enter into Lent, but I think Easter is a beautiful season yeah, to
Well,
embrace some of those joyful things.
that's exactly where I was going. I think it's a lot more, even though we resist it, it
Mhm.
is more natural in Lent and even Advent to have this penitential stance, this
Yeah.
reflective stance, examining. I wonder if we've forgotten how to practice joy. That and in our culture today, when we do practice joy, sometimes we're looked down upon because how can you celebrate when there are so many things going wrong? But that is what the Bible says, and that is what true joy
Yeah.
is to find
Yeah.
this celebration. So,
Yeah, we have to hold the lament and grief in this holy tension with the joy and the delight, and both are true, and both need to be honored for the fullness. Otherwise, we descend just into cynicism and despair, or we go into just like kind of a Pollyanna sort of everything's fine, spiritual bypassing, and we don't want either of those things. So we want to embrace both, that whole spectrum.
mhm. Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned the Wisdom of the Body book. Are there any other books of yours that or you have so many resources on your website, which is the Abbey of the Arts for those who are watching? What would you recommend people explore?
Mm. Well, we have a whole series of prayer cycles of morning and evening audio podcasts on different themes. There's 5 weeks of prayer cycles, which is just a great, if you want to move into a rhythm of morning and evening prayer.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's some fresh readings in there and music that we've commissioned and all of that. Uh, yeah, we have a lot of online retreats and programs, and some self-study programs. Another book, if people are really drawn to the Visio Divina, I have a book called Eyes of the Heart, which is on photography as a contemplative practice. And so really explores a bit more, breaks open this idea of sacred seeing and Visio Divina and what that,
All right. I know
how
my
that can
next book
transform.
purchase. I love photography. And so I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I work in Washington, D.C. I commute back and forth about once a month. Last week I was in D.C. and out exploring neighborhoods. And even though I wasn't doing my contemplative walking, I found myself drawn to the smallest things. There was a house with birds painted across the door frame, and just even the buds on the trees. I just started
Hmm.
taking pictures of all of these things. It's
Yeah.
amazing once you open to seeing what is in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a beautiful way to cultivate joy and delight and gratitude and a sense of blessing and to
Mhm.
slow down enough and open your eyes and see what's shimmering.
Well, I could stay and talk to you all day. I love contemplative practices. It's been a big part of forming me in my own life. But is there anything that you want to say to those who are engaged in Washington National Cathedral's book study this Lent? What would you leave us with?
Well, I'll say, first of all, that I'm just very honored, and it's a great privilege to be let into people's spiritual lives. And I feel enormous gratitude for that. And honestly, just wish a lot of blessings upon the journey. And I'd say, go very gently with yourself, that the spiritual journey is not always, joy and delight and pleasure, that there is a lot of stumbling and struggle and unknowing and uncertainty as well. And so I would say, make space for all of that to part of the journey of spiritual healing is to welcome back in all of those parts of ourselves that we've, abandoned or orphaned off or, shut outside of our hearts. And so if there are moments of struggle or doubt, to be really kind with yourself and to welcome those parts in with some loving compassion.
Oh, that's beautiful. We did talk Tuesday night about if things come up, because you have that wonderful section in the introduction, and I wanted to make sure people paid attention to that, that things might come up and you're doing it right if that happens. And it's also
Yeah, yeah,
okay if they
exactly.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. Lovely.
Well, we can't thank you enough for your time this morning. Well, afternoon for you, morning for me. Who
Yeah,
knows what time it'll be when people watch it. Uh, but we
we're
really,
in time outside of time.
yes, I have learned so much about time zones lately and scheduling meetings. But it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jo.